Sarah, are you ready to go? We're ready to go.
Okay. Well, good evening, everyone. I hereby call the Monday, July 24th, 2023 Cumberland Town Council meeting to order. Just a few housekeeping items here before we get started. We did start a little bit earlier today. We had an executive session where we were discussing a proposed settlement in a court case that I'll be talking about later as part of the agenda. That was at 4:30, and then we went right into a workshop at 5 o'clock where we discussed some recent demographic data that was put together by a consultant for us to try to better understand the needs in our community for potential affordable housing. And so the first item on the agenda tonight for the town council meeting is the approval of the minutes from July 10th of 2023. Do we have any? We've got a motion.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. We'll give that one to Shirley. Any questions on the minutes from the 10th? Seeing none. All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. Next, we go to manager's report. Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to turn right to Chief Rumsey, who has a presentation, and then I'll finish my remarks after he's completed.
Thank you, Mr. Manager, Mr. Chair, and councilors. I appreciate the opportunity to take just a few minutes of your time this evening to recognize some truly outstanding work on the part of Officer Matt Merriman. So, Matt, would you mind coming up and just having a spot right there in front of the podium? So this opportunity, this time is for me to take the opportunity to present Officer Matt Merriman with our department's Meritorious Service Award. And so what I'll do is take just a moment to read the letter that I put together to recognize Matt for his actions on the morning of July 3rd, 2023. The Meritorious Service Award is awarded to an individual department member for a highly unusual accomplishment under adverse conditions with some degree of hazard to the life of the member, the unit, or another person. It is my honor and pleasure to recognize you, Matt, with this Meritorious Service Award for actions taken on July 3rd, 2023 to rescue a woman considering suicide on Blackstrap Road. On July 3rd at approximately 4:45 a.m., you arrived on Blackstrap Road in response to the report of a person on the railing at the I-95 overpass. Upon your arrival, you exited your cruiser and began your approach of the individual, whom you could see was sitting on the overpass railing with both feet over the rail. Immediately, you began attempting to establish rapport and communication with the woman to de-escalate the situation and convince her to move to safety. You understood that if she jumped or fell onto the interstate below, a fatality would certainly result. Due to the noise of traffic on the interstate, you slowly moved closer in hopes of hearing the individual if she responded to your efforts to help her. As you did so, you observed the individual stand up on the ledge and remove her hands from the rail. You suspected tragedy was just moments away. As you continued to implore the subject, please don't do this, you maneuvered within arm's reach. With no hesitation, you grabbed her around the waist and pulled her back over the rail to safety. You both fell to the roadway on Blackstrap, and you kept the woman secured briefly so she did not attempt to return to the rail. As you secured the woman to ensure her safety, you continued calmly communicating with her and working to get her off the wet roadway and into a cruiser for her warmth and comfort. The speed and ease with which you switched from crisis management mode to concerned caregiver was truly impressive and heartwarming to see. You maintained your concerned and calming contact with the individual until Cumberland Rescue arrived to transport her to the hospital for evaluation and further care. It's my firm belief that without your swift, decisive, and efficient action, the woman you encountered would have intentionally jumped or accidentally fallen. I'm so impressed with your attempts to connect with this individual who was in crisis and to implore her not to take her own life. As you did this, you also assessed the situation, determined what needed to be done, and did not hesitate. Your conduct brings honor to the Cumberland Police and puts on display our department values of dedication, respect, integrity, vigilance, excellence, and nobility. These actions make you eligible for our department's Meritorious Service Award, which I am pleased to present to you tonight. I'm proud of you, your team members are proud of you, and I know the community is proud of you as well. We're lucky to have you watching over the town of Cumberland. Congratulations. Matthew Merriman for your swift, decisive, and efficient actions on July 3rd, 2023 to rescue a suicidal individual, risking your own safety in the process. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
So most of you may have seen the body camera video, but what we did, for those of you that may not have, earlier today, working with Town Communications Director Whitney Miller, we were able to place the media release that went out to the media outlets in the state of Maine and the letter that I just presented to Matt and the body camera video onto our town website, so cumberlandmaine.com. If you go and find the police department's page, you'll be able to find that link. And so his body camera video is on there, and also pretty amazingly, body camera video from Sergeant Scott Hendy, who we also gave a Meritorious Service Award to, you may remember, just about 3 months ago for pulling a woman out of a burning vehicle. We had his body camera video also. We were able to get that redacted and placed up there so folks in the community could see the truly excellent work that these officers are doing. We have an amazing team, and they are two shining examples of why we should really be proud of the folks that are taking care of us. So thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Chief. Yeah, thank you.
Chief.
Bill, did you have anything to add to that, or?
No, I think the chief is right. We have an amazing team. We're just very fortunate to have the officers we do, and I'm very proud of Matt as well as Scott. And those of you who were at the public safety banquet were able to recognize Scott, and that was truly an amazing save as well. And we just have a great team, and I'm very proud of all of them and all the work they do here. So thank you, all of you. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you very much, and congratulations, Officer Merriman. That was quite incredible. I watched the body cam video today before coming to the meeting, and I'm so glad that I read the memo and knew the outcome before I watched that video, because it was heart-wrenching to watch, but it was just beautiful the way that you were able to connect with that person, to slow down the process, to ask questions, to connect, and save a life. So thank you very much. Well deserved.
Thank you, Matt. Okay, so it's hard to jump to brown-tail moss from that, but we do have a few other things to talk about. Obviously, Channel 13 is not interested in the brown-tail moss, so they're leaving us now. But, oh, you already did. Thank you, guys. Appreciate that. So just quickly, interesting video, interesting comments. Melissa Gatine sent out a couple emails a few weeks ago about brown-tail moss and their attraction to light. And I was interested, so I contacted the state entomologist. Shirley connected us with an online article at the Press Herald had published. And we started looking at it, but then I walked out the door one night from a meeting and looked up, and they're all over the entrance of Town Hall on both ends. And then I started looking at home, and I'd noticed that near streetlights, I'd find more and more brown-tail moss. Well, there is definitive studies out there that basically recognize that between, I think it's June and August, these moss are attracted to light. And if you can eliminate the light, you may have the potential of eliminating where they build their nest for the next year, and hence the agony that comes with it when they hatch. So what I'd like to present to the council is another look at this, maybe in December and January, to actually look at our streetlight patterns and where the biggest infestation is. Because if there's a potential that during those 2.5 months, essentially, that we could eliminate street lighting, and we don't have a ton of street lighting as it is, it may help a lot of these neighborhoods from basically these nests coming to their areas and just continuing to stay. So I will ask the state entomologist to come down and basically talk to us about that. He's already said to me that, you know, public safety, when I talk about public safety, the public's safety has to come first. And we do have to look that if it's a really sharp curve or a really dangerous area, we're not going to be able to shut all the lights down. But we certainly can decrease the intensity of the light as well as shut them down, period. And we can do that street light by street light in our community now because of the LED system that we have. So something to think about. A little hesitant to do it, just arbitrarily just shut all the lights down. But while in the fall, they'll do another report of what they saw for brown-tail moth infestation and where the highest concentration was. So anything we can do would be helpful, because if you remember, all the work we did on the Fore Side, especially and even Tuttle Road, it really didn't amount to much. We kept coming up with these high-intensity maps, and we really didn't do a lot for the infestation overall by just spraying from the street. But maybe this is a much more effective way of reducing and giving people some relief, possibly. So let's talk about it this, toward January, and bring those neighborhoods in so they have, some input for you, and we could find out maybe some of the reasons why or why not this would be a good idea in specific areas.
That's great. Shirley, did you have a comment?
The older I get, the nerdier I become, but I also read in those articles that yellow light is less attractive than white light
And we
to
have
them.
white
And
light.
I hesitate to mention that because I'm not sure. I know we replaced a whole bunch of lights at a whole lot of expense, but that's something I'd like to look at too, the color of our lumens.
And let the record reflect that Councilor Story King is reading about brown-tail moth light infestation and attraction at 11 o'clock at night or whatever it is at her house, so thank you.
Sorry, folks.
That's okay.
So a couple of other things. Paving around town. I just want to report again that it is weather dependent. Every day it rains, it pushes us back another day. We are now scheduled to start in the Greeley Road neighborhoods that were on the paving schedule this coming year, possibly Monday or Tuesday of next week, all again weather dependent. So keep your fingers crossed that it's sunny during the daytime, and if we get any rain, it's at night. So, and it looks pretty good for this week, so I'm hopeful that we stay in the queue. We are in the paving queue. We can't dictate what the weather does, and we're getting closer to the top of the list. So that's the best I can say right now. We're hoping that it stays that we get our paving done in August, but it still looks good for the month of August. So the hillside area, all those roads off of Greeley Road, those neighborhoods that are scheduled to be paved, hopefully we'll be starting Monday and Tuesday next week. We also have Senior Tax Assistant Rebate Program, our annual program, our town-sponsored program for seniors that qualify, 93,000 or less of income, 10-year resident, and 70 years of age. Those are the requirements. We sent out letters to all those who have participated in the program just to remind them that it's coming up. There'll be drop-in periods, I think, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of next week, but give us a call here at Town Hall. Whitney or Devin are taking the calls, so ask for Whitney or Devin, and they will be able to assist you and get you in the queue. It literally takes us longer to walk you to the table than it does to fill out the application. It's very simple. We've really expedited it, and I'm really proud of the way we've put it together. John Brushwine has been critical in helping us with that program, and we appreciate your work with that too, John. So, and he's a busy man lately, as you'll find out this evening. Also, if you go to our website and look at the Active Living upcoming programs, I think there are 4 programs a week, Monday through Thursday, scheduled at the Recreation Center, formerly known as the Banquet Center at Valhalla. So there is a lot going on there for seniors. Devin has done a phenomenal job. Devin Galvin's our senior I'm trying to be careful not to say the old name, but Active Living Director. She has done a great job with that, and I'm really proud of the work she's done and the numerous grants that she has been receiving lately. So we'll bring her back in the fall and just have a check-in and let you ask your questions. But she has some very interesting events coming up for seniors in the future, so keep an eye on that and look at the calendar under Active Living and you'll see all those events. I'll also be at that one of those events this Thursday to talk about the tax programs and particularly what that means to our seniors. There were over 700 applications that came into John Brushwine this year for freezing senior taxes at last year's level. That will be, unfortunately, a one-and-done program. The state has basically repealed the entire program, so it will be a one-year rebate for all the 700 residents, and then It'll disappear and be replaced with the Property Tax Fairness Act, which will increase the levels and include more people in the program, but it won't be the same as freezing your taxes in place. As I have shared with the council and others who have asked, so the tax increase we have this year, just under 4.5%, plus the tax increase that we anticipate next year, is going to be a lot of money for seniors that haven't had to pay that gap now for 2 tax cycles. So I'm a little nervous about next year and the collection of taxes next year, because it's hopefully we'll get more people to participate in the program next year. I think this year will be a busy year, but next year will be and should be even busier. And I don't know what to say at this point, other than we tried to work with the state on their program. Many of us felt that we couldn't figure out how the state was going to pay for it, and I think they don't really know how they're going to sustain this type of program, because they were overwhelmed as much as we were here locally. So that we'll be talking about that. Steve Moriarty has agreed to join me, since it was his program that his group of folks that had to repeal that for monetary reasons, and he'll do the best he can to share what he knows about what's next from the state of Maine. And I think he'll talk more about the Fairness Tax Act than anything else, which is important. So we want to basically have that available when we start meeting with seniors next week, so they at least know what to look for in their tax returns for this calendar year. And then finally, this Wednesday night, we will be hosting a very large event, well, hopefully. It's a Tweed Brooks event. It's an event that was brainstormed by a bunch of local people that were involved with the bicentennial celebration for the town. We got together. They asked if we could do a smaller version, something that was more of a drop-in for families. We do a lot for a lot of members of our community, but families seem to be kind of the missing element. I explained that we used to do like concerts up by the high school on Sunday nights, and we used to put signs around town, and we'd get maybe 25 to 50 people, and it was okay for a couple of years, but it just kept dying out. When we talked about a family event, many people said, well, it'd be great if you could do it on a weeknight so we could get just a break during the week. And I thought they had some good ideas. It was really a drop-in with some basically lawn games, maybe a couple of bounce houses to be the attraction to pull families in, and local food trucks, and local as well as area food trucks that would basically be the night out for families. We also were able to attract some vendors. We've got a vendor that is doing free face painting for the kids from the local churches at no cost, and then a vendor who does arts and crafts, and that'll be no cost as well. We invited a couple of the local farms. One couldn't make it because he's busy out in the field right now and trying to get his crops together, and the other one, Sweetzers, they will be there as well. We'll have music there from a band that is formerly a Greeley student. It'll be folksy band, and it should be well attended. And then the volunteers are bringing a bunch of lawn games. The town is providing the 2 bounce houses at a cost of about $750. We are staffing it with a Public Works and Parks employee just to basically drop the tents at 8 o'clock. I did speak to the recreation chairman about the event. He informed me that they were kind of informally notified at the end of one of their meetings, but I apologize for not being more specific about this. I believe that we were expecting less than 200 people or so, and that this wasn't going to be a mass gathering. I think the bigger issue might have been the food trucks. I thought because of your endorsement for the Labor Day soccer tournament, that was an okay thing, because we were having trouble staffing the concessions, and it seemed like it was an easier thing for food trucks to bring a variety of meals and desserts and et cetera. But I apologize if I misinterpreted that to the council, because it wasn't my intention to circumvent any of the process, but I really felt we were within our realm. And when I brought it to my staff, I said, this is what I'd like to do. We met with the rec team only because I needed to find a night that Twin Brook was available, and that really was my biggest request of when can we get to use the site. And honestly, there was only a couple nights that were even available this summer. What we're hoping is that we can continue this program in the future. Hopefully this event Wednesday night and then one in early August will be an attraction for families, and I do hope it gets to be as big as a mass gathering. We have to be before you for that. So that would be great, but I do think coming out of the gate we'll be, happy if 200 people showed up. We'd be happy if 100 people showed up. So I think it's a positive thing, but again, it's on me. If I overstep my bounds, I apologize for that, but I do think it's a great event for families, and I do think all people are invited to come, but it is kind of geared more toward the family grouping. So if you have any questions, let me know, and I'd be happy to correct anything for any of the future events there as well.
Thank you very much, Bill. It sounds like a great event. I did have a question for you on the tax rebate program that we have. What the current, like you said, you reached out to folks in the community who've participated in the past. Can you remind me what that number is?
We had over 200 families last year participate in our program. Out of I think the 220 applications, there was less than 5% that were not qualified to participate.
Okay.
I think last year, I lost Whitney. I should have asked her before, but I think the average return was about $500 per family last year.
Okay.
So, because we were close to $100,000.
That might be something interesting, and we can talk about this, but to talk with Steve Moriarty about expanding that statutory authority that we have under that specific program to extend to different income levels or lower income levels, or kind of broadening that ability to grow that program. Because I feel like in some towns we've kind of hit a cap there, and maybe there's more squeeze there, but I'm not sure.
No, we're okay. I mean, we set the limits. The senior tax committee is the one that basically, we call it, the senior circuit breaker committee is the way we used to refer to it, but there is no circuit breaker anymore. But the senior tax committee now basically sets the limits, and as long as we have we extend it to home ownership as well as renters. That's one of the requirements of the law. And the second one is that we do take into account incomes, and we do that in basically essentially the more you make, the less you get, and that has worked well. So we are within our authority to do whatever you want.
Yeah, and I guess I'm not talking about whether we're currently operating within the bounds of the statute, but rather whether the statute itself could be expanded to allow more people to qualify, right? So let's say you raise the income level from 93 to 105 or something.
You're allowed to do that.
But it was my understanding that the statute kind of set that cap for you.
No, we set the cap.
Okay, well, we
set the
should
cap.
talk about that. Okay.
I agree with you, but give us the authority to do what we want to do in our community.
Yeah, I just want to revisit that, because it strikes me as where we do have municipal authority and ability to kind of play with those. That's something I would like to look at, I think.
Yeah, and we finally capped it. It used to be at a percentage of AMI, but it was climbing over 100,000 quickly. So the committee at that time said we're going to raise it. We were as low as 62 in age, and then we moved it up slowly so that more people that were seniors could stay and we could offer more money. So that's how we got to 70. And then 93 was just a arbitrary number.
Yep.
93,000.
No, it's clearly a great program that we have here, and the ability, I'm just thinking about in terms of where we have the authority to act, and it seems like a really great program to look at and see if there's anything else we can do.
So you will see when you get the report, we redact the names because it is a public document. But we do redact the names and addresses because then you can match it up very easily. But you will see the level of income, and we can sort by income, and then and you'll be surprised again at the numbers of really people that don't have a ton of money and are staying here in this community, and this is a very valuable program for them to say. So.
Okay. Is that it for the managers?
That is.
Okay, thank you very much. We now move to public discussion. Public discussion is for comments on items that are not on the agenda. Comments are limited to 5 minutes per person, and rebuttal comments will be limited to 2 minutes. Public discussion topics may be brought up again under new business for further council discussion. Is there anyone from the public who would like to address the council this evening? Okay, seeing none, we will go ahead and close public discussion and move to legislation and policy. First item on the agenda is 23-077, to appoint a member to the MSAD 51 Board of Directors. With this, I will probably pass it to my colleague, Counselor Kopp, who chairs our nomination committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Last Wednesday night, we had 5 interviews with 5 very qualified candidates for the school position. We interviewed all 5 of them, and afterwards we deliberated for probably a half an hour or 45 minutes, and it was not an easy decision, but we did come up with a candidate, and I think he well fits the job, so I will make a motion if you want, or if you want to open it up to public.
I'd happily accept a motion, and
Okay.
then we can maybe do some discussion if there's
I
anything
move
else.
to appoint Dennison Gallaudet to the MSAD 51 Board of Directors.
Second.
Beat you to it, Bob. Okay, we have a motion and we have a second. Is there any discussion, please?
Ronnie, I wasn't here, I was in Fort Kent last Wednesday, but I don't think you guys could have picked a better person, and Denny Gallaudet's a good man, and he'll do well on that.
I think he's pretty well qualified. So.
Yeah, I think so. We could probably tutor him a little bit.
Yeah, and to kind of second Ron's comments about the candidates that we had, all 5 were fantastic. And I would encourage all 5 to consider public service in some capacity, whether it's on the school board now or it's on the council at some point. There was just a lot of talent and a lot of thoughtfulness and a lot of vision and I think drive from all the candidates. And so I would highly encourage any candidate that we spoke to. First off, thank you for putting your name in the ring. That's never easy to do. And to consider doing it again. So are there any, this is a public discussion, if there's any comments from the public?
I'd just like to make a quick comment. I was so impressed with Mr. Gallaudet when he came and he was talking about terms, and it probably went right over your heads. But he said, yeah, we're 48% over EPS, and I'm thinking, this sounds a little tweaky, but how many people even know what EPS is, you know? And do people on the school board know what EPS is? The EPS is Essential Programs and Services, and it is an integral part of what the school board has to consider when they develop their budgets. And you were so specific about, yes, I wonder about this, and I wonder about that, and I wonder about this, and I was just really impressed with you. You called it kind of a hobby that you like to pay attention to, school funding and school funding laws, but I appreciate the fact that it's a hobby for you, and now we're in your hands.
So with that, I guess we have a motion and we have a second. All those in favor of nominating Denny Gallaudet? Unanimous. Thank you very much, and thank you, Denny, for putting your hat in the ring. Really appreciate it.
Good luck.
Yeah.
When we were interviewing, I kept saying to the candidates, we're all interviewing you for a job none of us really want.
Yeah. Okay, moving on to legislation and policy, item 23-078, to hear a report from the tax assessor and hold a public hearing to consider and act on setting the fiscal year 2024 tax rate. We are lucky to have our tax assessor, John Brushwine, here to fill us in on what sounds like some crazy data. So
Yeah.
you have the floor.
Good evening, council members, Mr. Manager, members of the public. It's that time to set the annual tax rate for 2024. One of the first things I have to do, and we've got a couple of new counselors that haven't heard this spiel before, is part of the calculation of the tax rate is calculating the LD1 municipal funding limit, tax levy limit. And that was legislation that was passed in 2005. The components of which are the annual property growth, which is growth in value due to new construction, and, additions, personal property, and the personal income growth, which is calculated by the Office of Maine Policy and Management, and they use a 10-year average. If the municipal tax levy exceeds the municipal tax levy limit, then the legislative body, or in this case, the council, would have to vote to exceed that. Again, this year, we did not exceed it, and so there's no actions necessary by the council. For the tax rate, the town's taxable assessed value increased $29,626,000 from April 1st, 2022 to 2023. The total taxable value of the town is $1,504,245,000. And it's my recommendation that the council set the FY24 tax rate at $22.15 per $1,000 of valuation, which represents a 4.48% increase in the tax rate over 2023. The increase is 95 cents on the tax rate. So for every $100,000 of assessed value, taxes will increase by $95. The current assessed ratio is 77% for FY24, which means that the homestead exemption is adjusted by that percentage, and veterans exemptions are adjusted by that percentage. Tree growth parcels, the tree growth rates are adjusted as well. So the homestead exemption this year is going to be $19,250. It was at full value, at 100%, it would be $25,000. And the veterans exemption is $4,620 for this year. At full value, it would be $6,000.
John, I just have an initial question here. Can you walk through how that assessment ratio of 77% is kind of calculated and why that's relevant?
As high as it is?
Well, yeah, but also, you know, why that's relevant to potentially, again, I don't want to jump ahead, but in terms of a revaluation at some
Okay.
point, like where do we fall? And that
So-
70% number struck in my mind.
Yes, and we've had this presentation before, but by state law, municipalities are required to assess property at a minimum of 70% of fair market value. The state, actually I do an annual sales ratio analysis, which the state then comes in and verifies to adjust the state valuation. So that's where the ratio comes into play.
Got it. And so currently we're at 77%.
Yes, and when I say we're at 77%, there's a time lag for that ratio calculation.
So it
because
could be 75.
It's probably closer to 60
Wow,
in reality.
wow. So if we fall below that 70% on
We're-
paper, what,
Essentially, we're required to do a revaluation.
understood, okay.
The good thing is that the quality rating is the second component of that state law. And if you have the quality rating under 20, then you're within the limits. Our quality rating most recently was 13,
Okay.
which is fine. And what that represents is it measures the ratio compared across all classes. So that, and in values. So your high value properties and your low value properties, there's not a big disparity in the two.
Got it. Can you also, I had a chance to bump into you outside and you shared some information, bless you, some information with me about some of the more recent home sale data. Would you mind sharing?
I'm gonna actually go into that afterwards,
my
after
apologies.
you've done the tax rate, after you've approved the tax rate.
Sure, okay, so maybe,
That's all right?
yeah, no, that's fine. So it looks like the tax rate at 2215 or a $95 increase lines up with where we landed in terms of our budget. I guess I would welcome a motion to set that value.
I don't think we have to, do we? Anyway, I do have a question.
Sure.
Of that 95 cents, in the past, we've gotten that broken out to how much of that increase is school, how much of that increase is county, how much of that increase is town. Can you tell us what
I
that is?
have not calculated that yet. That is part of the calculation that we do for the tax bills, so that shows up on that. I don't know if Bill's got that
Do you
handy.
know what it is, Mr. Sheen?
I do. If you give me 1 second, I will get to it, and I'll get right back to you.
We usually have a little pie chart.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
always.
I think it was discussed. Would it have changed since the budget? I wouldn't think so. But
If it did, it was very
It's
small.
always, until we said it today, it's always kind of,
Very close. Okay. Sorry. Okay, what it is, of the 95-cent increase, 59 cents was the school, 11 cents was the county, and 24 cents was the town. So it was 62.32% of the increase was attributed to the school's increase. Just under 12 was the county, and the town's was about 20, just under 26% of the increase.
Thank you very much.
So 26% of the
24 cents or 26% of the 4.4, or it was
48%, yeah.
1.15 of
Right.
the.
that's what I'm trying to get to.
Oh,
is-
you want,
yeah.
I'll give you the actual. 2.79% of the 4.48 was the school, 0.53 was the county, and 1.15% was the town.
Okay. Great. I guess before we do the motion as well, maybe I'm always reminded that every item that we have on the agenda is a public item. So if anyone from the public has a comment, you're welcome to step up now. Okay, seeing none. Would welcome a motion from anyone.
Mr. Chair, I'll give you a motion. I move to set the municipal tax rate for FY 2024 at $22.15.
Second.
Okay, seeing a motion and a second. Any other public comment before we vote here? Doesn't look like it. Okay, all those in favor? Appears to be unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, John.
So I also wanted to comment on the property tax stabilization legislation that has now been repealed. Obviously, the intent was good, to provide relief for seniors and provide tax relief for seniors. The problem was, as Mr. Shane has indicated, Manager Shane has indicated, is that they weren't going to be able to fund it. It was not going to be fiscally solvent. So we're going to have the stabilization for 1 year. And I just want to let you know, this is, I mean, from my standpoint, the amount of work has been incredible. We had 720 applications, all of which I have to track. And there's a couple of various components. So if a taxpayer that's in the senior tax stabilization program didn't have a homestead exemption, which there are some that don't, and as soon as we identified those people, then we made sure that they applied. But now I have to calculate whether or not their tax would be less with the homestead exemption or without the homestead exemption at the previous rate, because now the rate's gone up. So there was a threshold of roughly $400,000. Anybody that was over $400,000 in value, they would gain from having the homestead exemption. Anyone that was under that would not. So that I had to keep track of. The other thing I had to keep track of is if anybody had an addition. If you added onto your house last year, after April 1st, then that's not counted for this coming year. So that stabilized rate is what you paid last year. I still have to track that amount, and we have to tax that amount for the full, because then we have to apply to the state for the reimbursement. And the big thing about that was that the law said that the state may reimburse the towns for 100% of the lost revenues. By law, the state only has to reimburse 50%. So that was another big concern. But with the repeal, they enhanced two other programs, the state deferral program and the property tax fairness credit program. I'm not going to get into all the details of that, but I am going to send out letters to the taxpayers that are in the stabilization program to let them know what's happening. Because as Manager Shane indicated, if you're in the stabilization program, you're going to see your stabilized tax at last year's rate, but next year you're going to get that amount, plus you're going to get whatever the increase in the tax rate is. And for the people that had additions, they're going to get the addition value increase, the tax value increase from the rate, and then the tax value increase from next year's rate. So I think it's important that we make those people aware of it. I'm sure a lot of people are aware of it. It's been in the news. But as I said, I'm going to send out letters to people to let them know and let them know about the changes to the other two programs. With respect to revaluation, we kind of have been in a holding pattern for the last few months because I'm trying to get the commitment done for this year. But at the height of the pandemic, interest rates were at an all-time low. We were 2.5% to 3%. Inventory was also low, which created essentially the perfect storm. So everybody was looking for housing. With low inventory, you had multiple bidders. In 2022, 84% of the properties that sold at or above asking price. Now, in the third quarter of 22, interest rates started to rise. And we are now at about 7 to 7.5% for a 30-year fixed mortgage. And the experts had predicted that we're going to see a big drop-off in value, a big drop-off in prices. What has happened is there are less sales. The amount of sales has decreased some, but the values continue to be astronomical. In 2022, the median sale price in the town of Cumberland was $630. From June of 22 to April of 23, the median in the state was $367,500. The sales from January 1st of 2023 until mid-July, the median sale price is $825,000 in Cumberland. And so the affordable house, if there is such a thing, and there isn't, is now, there's very few houses that sell below $500,000. At the $500,000 range is where you're going to see the 1970 ranch, the 3 bedrooms, 1 bath, or a Cape, similar. But we just had a recent sale in West Cumberland. It was a house that was 656 square feet, sold for $300,000. That's $457 a square foot. So as far as the revaluation is concerned, we're going to get back into it starting in August. We're going to be reviewing the sales that have occurred this year. We've already reviewed the sales from 2022. And what we're trying to do is determine how we're going to make the schedules work. Because adjusting your land and building schedules with a market that is as volatile as this market is, you don't want to end up in a situation where you are at the peak and then you have a decrease. So that's where we are right now. I plan on coming back to see the council probably in the end of October to give you a more detailed update on what's taking place and where we're going to go.
Any questions from the council?
I just have one question. I attended the GPCOG Summit, and the keynote speaker, Kevin Bunker, said one of the things that stuck in my mind was the houses that rise the fastest crash the fastest. Would you agree or disagree? I know it's kind of, in your wheelhouse, but
Yeah, it's hard to say.
it's a risky question
It is.
to
I mean,
answer.
it's hard to say whether that's going to happen. Pretty much, that's one of the interesting things is if you look across the town, from Cumberland Foreside to Cumberland Center to West Cumberland, the ratio of sales that are coming in is very similar. So I think if you had a crash, the people that would be affected the most, this is just a guess on my part, would be the $500,000 range. Because if you got in at $500,000 at 2.5%, and all of a sudden your value decreases by $200,000, you're gonna be below water.
Right. I worry about those people as they buy up in town. Yeah. Thank you, John.
Any other questions? I did have it's not maybe relevant anymore with LD 290 being repealed, the stabilization program, but just curious, out of those 720 applications that you received, did you get an indication? I know the law did not have an income limit, which was one of its issues.
Right.
Any indication as to the spectrum of income levels, people coming in and applying? Was it?
It was all over the board.
It was all over. Okay.
I mean, I had one taxpayer, part of the proof included in the law was your tax return.
Right.
I actually had somebody send me a copy of their tax return, which that was not the intent of the law, but the income was substantial of this person that was applying for the stabilization. He qualified, resident for over 10 years, had a homestead in Maine for over 10 years. He was over 65, qualified. Anyone that meets those qualifications, I would have encouraged him to apply to.
Correct.
But it was all over.
Well, I think that's it from the council. John, thank you for the update. That was great. It's a lot to think about, and we look forward to having you back anytime you're willing to come and update us, because it seems to be changing every week. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item number 23-079, to hold a public hearing to set rates at which interest will be paid for delinquent taxes and to authorize applying tax payments to the oldest unpaid taxes. This is, just checking in here, Mr. Manager, but this is a program that we've done for quite some time, hoping to encourage folks who may be delinquent on their taxes to talk to the town, communicate with the town so that we can work with you to hopefully get those paid back, stay in your home. I think that's generally been the policy of the town, but there are there are state laws that dictate what the maximum interest rate can be on those delinquent taxes. I know we as a town tend to apply those delinquent payments towards the oldest balance amount first, to help folks kind of get out of the financial hole that they may be in due to those delinquent taxes. But it strikes me as today we're looking to set an interest rate of 8% for delinquent real and property taxes for fiscal year 2024. In the packet, it doesn't look, my initial question is, it doesn't look like it's got a number there.
It should be 8%.
Oh, there we go. I had a yellow highlight on mine for some reason.
Yeah, me too.
So, do you have any comments before we open it up here?
Typically, Maine Municipal works with the Maine Retirement Savings Board to help set those on an annual basis so that they give guidance to communities on where they should be at a maximum. It's your prerogative to set the rate. In 2022, it was 4%, 21 it was 4 to 6%, 20 it was 8, and it's been hovering between 7 and 8%, probably, well, it was 12% in 2007. So, you know, it's been right around 8%, except for 22 and 21 where it dropped to 4%. So we have typically accepted that recommendation and set that rate to that recommendation.
I remember setting it in 2022 and 2021 when those interest rate numbers felt, I guess, a little bit more comfortable to me. Do we want to have a discussion at all about whether 8% feels comfortable? Are these linked to like LIBOR
It's
or?
a maximum rate.
The
It's a
maximum, okay. Go ahead, Matt.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to see it pretty cut in half. I mean, if people are having a tough time, I don't want to I don't wanna go after them with delinquent taxes if they're having a tough time, but they're making payments, and, I think 4% is a fair price. A fair rate, I should say.
Is there a concern that the town will be out in terms of, as our interest rates change, you know, when we take out loans or do whatever we need to do financially as a town, is there concern that if we go much lower than the maximum, that there'll be this delta liability for us where we're borrowing at 8, but we're getting paid back at 4? In other words, I just want to make sure, I would totally agree with Counselor Eads that I want to make sure that we're not putting more undue pressure and creating some usury law where somebody can't get out of the
Fair-
hole,
that's
right?
a fair concern, Mark.
No, and I think since the council and particularly the finance committee has achieved our 12% goal of savings, and we'll call it our rainy day fund, the money that we have, we don't touch, I think it's less of a concern today than it was maybe 10 years ago. I think we've done a really good job in putting money away and putting aside, so I think that offers you a lot more flexibility because of that. And it's been probably 4 or 5 years since we've had a tax anticipation note.
Okay. Would you like to add something?
Yeah, do we know the total of, like, delinquent taxes at this point? Like, do you know what the total across all parties might potentially be?
We have one of the highest tax collection rates in the state.
No, I know,
So
but
the
of
outs,
delinquent taxes.
Right.
I can get you that information. It
Okay.
changes daily.
Okay.
And it'll get down almost to less than 50,000 by December, just before foreclosure. Typically, it's at a high now around, right after when liens come out, and then it starts to go sharply down as we get closer to foreclosure.
Okay.
Any other comments? I mean, just speaking from a personal perspective, I would tend to agree with Counselor Eads that my concern is that by hitting the maximum, we are furthering the snowball effect of high interest and inflation, all these other things. Everyone thinks that something's going up, and so everyone raises their prices at the same time. It's this larger kind of economic theory. I would personally feel much more comfortable around a 4% to make it easier for folks. I don't recall from our finance committee meetings that the amount outstanding would be significant. I mean, I think we've got like a 99% or 98% collection rate in terms of our tax revenues. So I would personally put a motion for 4%, but if anyone else has comments or thoughts, I'm happy to hear those and be open to that. And also, this is a public discussion, so if anyone else has comments, please let me know.
I'm comfortable with 4%. It kind of would make me sleep well at night, I think, as well, just to know that we're kind of doing the right thing, and especially since we have that wiggle room with our rainy day fund. Seems like the right thing to do from my perspective.
Agreed.
4 it is.
Okay. Well, I would accept a motion. I can also give it, but I would accept one.
Can't make a
I can't
motion.
give a motion. Thank you for my first time.
I move to set an interest rate of 4% for delinquent real and personal property taxes for FY 2024. Be it further ordered that all payments for delinquent real and personal property taxes be applied to the oldest unpaid taxes.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any public discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Okay, moving on to 23-080, to hear a report from the town manager regarding the Verizon tower lease. Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This gets a little complicated. Verizon, of course, looks at all their leases every year and then tries to basically negotiate a new lease if they feel a lease may be out of whack with what their standards are. Right now, they have tried, and you know, we are obligated on the current lease that we have to renegotiate those terms so that their annual payment to us is about, I think it's about $5,000 less on an annual basis, but they've extended it out by about 9 or 10 years. That's the real juxt of the offer by Verizon, is to extend the term of our lease out to 2056, and I'm thinking it expires currently in 2038, so it might have even gone further, but reduce the payment down to $1,650, which currently is, that's $1,650 per month, which currently it's much more than that. It averages about $5,000, a little over $5,000 a year more what we are currently receiving. We don't have to do anything because we're under contract, so we can leave it as it is, or we can buy additional we can negotiate for those additional years, and the escalator will stay the same, 15% every 5 years. Personally, I think with a longer-term lease, you will have more leverage if you choose to sell that lease. So the town of Yarmouth, for instance, basically took their tower leases and sold them, and basically got a cash settlement of like $650,000 for their lease when they sold it. So for us, we would have that same option if we weren't happy with it. The tricky thing for us also is that we're in the process of negotiating tower space on that lease at Valhalla for our public safety program. So it's two different hands of the same operation, but we also want to be cognizant of the fact that we want to get on that tower, and then after that, it would be more of an appropriate time to look at that. They have been good to work with, so I'm not complaining about any kind of relationship issue. It's been good money to have that lease for the golf course. It was over $20,000 a year, so I'm comfortable either way, leaving it as it is or extending it out to 2056 if you want, but that would essentially be about $5,000 a year less than we're getting currently. I'm just trying to see if I can do the math. No.
Yeah, it looked to me that the current lease expires in 2039, right?
Correct.
And it sounds like there's been an offer that's been rejected, and then there was a counter offer that Verizon's attorneys or whoever it was viewed as a rejection, as a counter offer effectively. But it strikes me in looking through those bullet points that the town attorney put together that the escalator of 15% every 5 years is kind of static throughout all of them, meaning that's like the agreed upon term, everyone feels fine with that. It also seems like a 5-year extension seems to be agreeable between both parties as part of the last two offers. But it looks like just the monthly rent reduction of 30% that they were looking for on that monthly outflow of cash was their concern. I'm wondering if we do want to extend something here, does it make sense to offer a lower monthly rent but increase the escalator at a certain point to almost get to the same point? And maybe that's already been discussed, but I know there's no action tonight. But any comments from the council, Mr. Cobb?
Bill, we're in the process of talking about a new tower in West Cumberland. Would they have any interest in space on that tower?
They were offered. Verizon was the first group I went to, and they had no interest.
They had no,
That's
okay.
why we went out for an RFP, and now
Okay.
we do have somebody that's interested.
All right.
But they may occupy some space on that tower at some time once it's built, but they
Right.
didn't want to build it, so.
Okay. Any other comments? No? Oh, Councilor Vail.
It seems a little incongruous to me that everybody's costs are going up for everything. And they want to reduce their costs, but they're going to charge those of us who use their services more. Doesn't really fit the straight face test. Their threat to leave, real or implied, I guess we should consider that, but I almost think that we'll see the lease out as is.
Yeah, it doesn't matter to us. We don't have to do anything. So we
Right.
can stay there, and they may sell it to somebody else, but they still have to abide by the terms of the contract that's there. So we're kind of, the offer was to extend it out, similar terms other than $5,000 reduction in annual payment, but extending it out 2056. I haven't done the actual value of money in 2056 to what we're looking to get, but I do believe that, you know, a future council might just sell that whole lease out once we have our public safety equipment on the tower. So that's always an option that you have. It doesn't have to happen today or 5 years from now, but anytime.
You and I will be on Moss side, so.
Okay, so thank you for that update. I appreciate it. There's no action on this evening, so.
No, other than I'm going to have to give them a kind of a lukewarm response from the council. I don't think I can bring anything that you've offered back, and that's kind of what I'm reading tonight. So we countered, which I thought was fair, a kind of a middle-of-the-road compromise, and they rejected that as well. So at this point, staying with what we have is not a bad thing at $25,000 a year instead of $20,000 a year. And then it expires in 39 versus what their counter came back at. It did go to 56 from 48, but yeah, I don't think we'll own it by then, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I think maybe staying the course then for now makes sense.
And I'll share that with Alyssa, and she can relay that to Verizon.
Great. Okay, thank you, Mr. Manager. We're moving on to 23-081 to consider a request from the town's insurer to consent to a proposed settlement in Reese versus Town of Cumberland negotiated by the town insurer. So this is current ongoing litigation that's pending in federal court, in which the town is involved on a human resources related issue. And the parties are currently in a judicial settlement conference, which by law, the terms of those conferences are confidential. But there is a proposed settlement here to settle this case. The town's outstanding liability for this, because it's going through its insurance, is about $2,500. So there's not a large outlay for the town. But it's a matter that we're hoping to get settled to move forward. We had an executive session discussion about it earlier this evening. And so now we are here to potentially consider the request from the town's insurer, the insurance company who's kind of stepped in with their attorneys as well, to the proposed settlement in the case that's been negotiated by that insurer. So with that said, I'll open it up if there are any questions from the council on this issue. Any questions from the public? This is also a public hearing. Seeing none, I would accept a motion.
I'll give you a motion.
Thank you.
I move that the town consent to the proposed settlement negotiated by the town's insurer in Reese versus Town of Cumberland, and that the town authorize the town manager to execute any documents necessary to effectuate the proposed settlement.
Second,
That was a tie. I think we'll give it
give
to.
it to Bob.
No,
He needs some
no.
excitement in his life.
We'll get. It's a separate off-agenda
I
topic.
feel the knife.
So we have a motion and a second. Any other comments from the public or any comments from the public? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? Unanimous. Moving on to 23-082 to hear a report from the town forester regarding Twin Brook Recreation Area Forest Management Plan and Invasive Plant Control Practice Plan. So I believe we are lucky enough to have Mr. Paul Larrabee here this evening to talk with us. Oh,
Oh, Sally's going
please,
to introduce.
Sally as well. Please come on up.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Sally Stockwell. I'm the Vice Chair of the Forestry Subcommittee of the Conservation Commission. And I just want to do a very short intro and then turn it over to Paul. What we have given you to look over are two documents that really need to be read together and thought about together. The first is the Forest Management Plan for Twin Brook, and the second is the Invasive Plant Management proposal for the property. And I think what you'll see in there, hopefully you've had a chance to at least scan the documents, is that the plan itself is really tied very closely to our guiding principles for all of our town forest lands, and has been updated to reflect the guiding principles and the interests of the town and the big concern around the potential for additional spread of invasive species at the site. So in combination with the plan, there's also the invasive species management plan, which really, what we'd like to do is sort of go ahead and try to address the invasive species plan before we do any sort of, or any extensive more forest management, active forest harvesting on the site. And so I'll let Paul run through some of the more details for you, but that's kind of the short intro.
Paul, do you need any of the slides up on the screen?
I have some on my phone of the plan, but if you had just the map.
Yeah, I'll pull the map up.
Good evening.
Good evening, Paul.
Thank you for
Come closer.
putting me down on the agenda. I was, we had a board meeting in New Gloucester. I was working on boards and committees bylaws. So thank you for putting me down on the agenda.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
Yes, congratulations on chair.
Oh, thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
I'm the chair as well now.
Okay,
Thank you.
congratulations.
Yep.
You have a lot more fun at their meetings, though.
Yeah, they do. You've been to my meetings, right? That's right. You've been to my meetings. That's right.
So here is the whole report. It's coming right up.
If we can just get to the map, then we'll talk about that.
He said New Gloucester?
There it is.
Okay.
Perfect.
All right, let's see if we can, do you want to make it bigger?
Sure.
I'm trying to.
Good man to know.
I need my expert, trying to make it bigger so you can see more of it.
Is it-
Any more way to make that any bigger, or is that it? That map itself? Probably, you might lose the screen, that's all.
That's okay.
Yeah, you sure?
That's okay.
All right.
Thank you. Yeah, no problem. And so some of you were on the walk with me when we went in the woods, and you got to see the invasive plants that we were discussing. And that was in, I don't know if you can tell them at compartment 2, which is behind the parking area right there on the map. We walked in that area right there. That's one of the most heavily infested areas of invasive. And it's also one of the poorest sites for timber as well. Wetter soils, very bad invasive plants. I don't say this lightly, but there's clearly a spread of the invasive plants along the trail corridors in general in Twin Brooks. That happens, through birds, moving seeds. A dog runs into invasive plants, runs out into another area, has seeds on them. That can happen. But this area right here, by far, is the worst area. In my recommendations in the invasive plant, this is kind of like a bottom priority for treatment because it's already so bad. It would take a tremendous effort to both financial and physical effort to fix that area or to try to reduce the amount of invasive plants there. My priority from the plan was the most recent harvested area where Jeff had been harvesting firewood. There's actually invasive plants scattered through there, but at this point they're just scattered, which is great, right? Because they can easily be treated in that area, but they're just scattered. Further in the invasive plant plan, you will see where I've GPS locations of the invasive plants.
Give you a pointer.
Yeah, are you
can-
able to help us kind of point out these
Sure.
specific spots? I remember walking with you on in the
Yep.
pink,
See this
the
pink
pink
Oh, look at
section.
that.
Yeah, there you go.
Look at that.
That would be helpful.
You grab this
You've
right
got
here.
good technology. We don't have this in
Yeah,
Gloucester.
it's high tech.
So,
So grab that and you can drag it around and just
look
point
at
to it.
that.
That will be really
Look at
helpful.
that. So, wow. I need your tech guy to come to New Gloucester for a little bit. So right here is the area that we walked, this compartment right here. And this area, I brought this area down to the trail. You know where the trail is between the two? In this corridor right here, there's actually quite a bit of Japanese knotweed as well. So it's near the ball fields, and it's spreading along the edges of the field. And that is really the only area I saw it on Twin Brooks is in this corridor right here. But this area right here is heavily infested. Now, the area that was most recently harvested is this area right here. And this area here, there are invasive plants, 2 or 3 species in the actual harvest area that would be really easy to treat at this point and stop the spread in the harvest area, which would be great. The open edges right here along the fields, obviously with the amount of sunlight, it's pretty thick along those open edges as well. Wild rose, bittersweet, buckthorn in those corridors. This area right here, which is 4, correct? Compartment 4, right here, is a relatively wetter site with steep ground, the trails in there. And that also has the paved trail portion of it, the hiking trail. When I was in there looking at invasive plants, the invasive plants were actually coming across the paved trail. So that area, anywhere where there's a sunlight opening in there, is full of invasive plants as well. To the point where they're going to start to affect your recreation on the trails in there. So I sent pictures to the members just saying that they're literally going to cross the trails. And that's going to be an annual issue unless there's some sort of treatment is done, because they're just going to keep growing. Okay, and then compartment 3, the big compartment right here, is kind of two-phased. Up in this corner, up in here, there's kind of like an old pine plantation area, which would be an old field pine plantation. It's described more in the management plan. But that area in the understory is completely full of buckthorn, invasive species. The older growth area of this stand in here, which is not old pine plantation, it's just natural growth, it's pretty scattered to this point, the invasive plants. And in my opinion, easily treatable. So priority-wise, you know, the recent harvested area with the increased sunlight, that's the priority number 1 for treatment. And then the bigger compartment here would be a priority 2 for treatment, because especially in the areas, the approach to invasive plants is start where it can easily be controlled first, the spread, and then work to the more heavily infested areas. In some of the more heavily infested areas, you're likely not going to be able to eradicate. It's just the reality. You're likely not going to be able to eradicate. What you're going to try to do is preserve your current uses, your rec uses, you know, your trails, but realistically, they're so bad. And I don't say this lightly. In this area right here, I don't even know what a treatment would entail, other than a clear cut and a site prep. Literally, just cutting the area and then replanting, because it's that bad. So I think you just work on containment and maintaining the recreation trails in that area. You know, the management plan, specific recommendations for forest management activities, all pertain to if this is treated, then this, then this. The good thing about this plan, we're writing this plan with the help of cost share from the Maine Forest Service to help cover the cost. And they just put out another round of applications for treatment, for grants. And the municipality, with this completed, would be eligible for those grants to help treat the invasive plants. So realistically, my conversation started with a focus on invasive plants, which typically, I'm a forester. I've been a forester for 24 years. I like managing forest. I love it, right? It's what I've done. But I've learned a lot in 24 years, and I've actually seen where, you know, I cut in areas where wasn't aware there was buckthorn. You know what I mean? And all of a sudden, the entire understory is full of buckthorn and bittersweet. There's so many vines now that you can't cut the trees because they won't fall to the ground. So I start with invasive plants because, to me as a forester, they scare me more than anything. Because the future of that forest, there could be, in 20 years, somebody could be standing here saying, there's nothing you can do because it's all invasive plants and the vines are in everything. Now, we've done this, I've done this for other municipalities. We've treated first. We've gone on a program of treating and then done management. But realistically, I'm just warning what you guys decide to do, but I've seen it. If you put sunlight on the ground it's gonna fill with invasive plants. That's just what happens. So, but the management plan is focused on, the actual forest management plan is focused on managing the forest after you make some control of invasive plants. That's just, and I wrote this to help you get money, hopefully to help you get money from the state to do it.
So I have a couple questions
Sure.
here just to start off. One, just from an educational standpoint, how did we get here? Is this a natural thing that's happening in Maine? Is it something that we in Cumberland did differently than other locations?
No, it's not just you. I mean, I would love, it's not, this isn't a, just a Twin Brooks or a Cumberland issue. I would say anything associated with old ag land tends to be the worst. And I'll say this.
Why is that?
Well, I'll say part of it was some of these were actually planted and recommended plantings for soil stabilization.
Oh.
Yes. And so, once a plant is used in that capacity, it's really, Japanese knotweed. Does everybody know what Japanese knotweed is? That is a very sophisticated invasive plant. It's bamboo, basically. It takes a tremendous effort to remove that, and you can't do it in one entry. You literally, the best time to deal with it is to mow it in June, let it resprout 3 to 4 feet, September-ish before frost, and treatment of herbicide, because it has so much reserved energy. It's a severe competitor to our trees. It wants to occupy the site. Now, buckthorn you have buckthorn here, you have buckthorn in Rhines. Buckthorn loves to dwell in the understory of a stand, and it'll just hang out right there. Just dwell in the understory until a tree dies or somebody cuts them, and then poof, it fills it. So it's not something that you guys did. It's something that, it's riparian corridors. They love to travel along riparian corridors. The seed loves to travel along. It's just a natural corridor for it to go. But any old ag land, the coast is the worst, anywhere along the coast. Old ag land, today I saw, if anybody traveled Route 100 between Gray and Cumberland, I actually saw DOT ditching in Gray, and the whole backs of the trucks were full of knotweed. I don't know where that's going, but I hope it's not going to somebody's lot, realistically. But the knotweed was sticking out of the dump trucks. So it was actually used, that's part of the problem is it's the education and then the spread of, it's actually being spread. So, like I said, I'm a forester. I love managing forests in Maine. I grew up in Gray. I haven't gone far. I've been managing forests in southern Maine my whole career. But as part of that, this is now the new part of forest management.
And that leads me to my second question. You said there will be a point at which you say there's nothing you can do.
Right.
On a scale of 1 to 10, where do you think we are on 0?
You're not there yet, but the closest compartment is that where we took our walk. In that, because it's marginal soils, it's wetter soils, and it's already heavily occupied. That's why I didn't prioritize that very high for treatment in that area. So if anybody's familiar with the forest out back here, right? So that's something that we've worked on. I know the public commented on, I remember walking out there, somebody from the public commented to me, why'd you clear cut it? We didn't. There wasn't any trees there. That was all invasive plants. There wasn't any trees removed other than dealing with invasive plants on that whole site.
Third quick comment, I know you've got something to add to,
Sure.
is you talked about the funding.
Yes.
When are those applications due? How did you, I guess we could start talking with the state, but do you happen to know in general?
Yeah, the middle of August.
Middle of August,
Yep.
okay.
Yep.
So let's add that as something to apply for.
I'll get you an exact date if you're.
Mr.
Sorry,
Manager.
I wasn't.
Paul, before you leave there, that
Yep.
that light blue where you have your red arrow is kind of where the dog trail
Yes.
was that we walked down through, and it was a jungle in there. And you mentioned the more purplish trail, right? Yeah, right
Yep.
in there. You said that was getting close to being almost like the forest is back here where we'd have to almost grind everything to the ground.
Yeah.
So if those two areas are areas that you've kind of, we've kind of lost the battle, what is the harm of basically harvesting in those two areas in the interim while you develop almost a grind everything to the ground plan like we had back here in the town forest?
Right. You will, it will be just, you'll never have trees again, because it'll be invasive plants, right? So over here, you're already losing trees. This is a marginal site. The tree quality is pretty bad anyway.
Okay.
And it's a lot of popple and pine and ash, and so it's pretty bad here. What's gonna happen, even if they die of mortality, then no new trees are gonna grow, okay? So ideally, what we could do is if we could treat the other areas where it's spot treatment, right? And then we decide in those areas right there, we may have to do a more aggressive treatment with the grinder, with the town grinder. You know, then we can work in that stand and actually grind that stand. I'd hate to lose the trees, right? The seed source and everything before we've done any grinding of the invasive plants in those sites. Because then we're gonna be talking about what we're talking about out here as replanting.
Replanting, and that's kind of a reality, at least in the town forest.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to replant. And the purplish area, your concern there, is it mostly invasives again, or are you seeing, no, back up, down a little bit.
Right
down,
there.
Right there.
Yep.
That area, that's a concern as well to you for being overtaken by the invasives?
Yeah, the wetter soils are already the wetter flat soils in there
Okay.
that are mapped on, if you look on the Twin Brooks map of the wetland soils, there's a big chunk in this area right here when they were proposing the development of the site.
Yeah.
So the relatively flat wetland areas in there, they're already all buckthorn in the understory with red maple in the overstory. But these areas up in here, behind the maintenance shop, literally the maintenance shop is encompassed with invasive plants all the way around it. And then when you get up in here, there's actually some really nice big hardwood and pine and really nice that you could actually treat this upper ground right in here. I don't ever foresee going in and treating the wetland areas with the buckthorn, and I really don't see cutting in those areas either. You know, commercially
It's
harvesting.
just not worth it?
It's not, it's a reserve area is what it is, potentially.
I don't
So
think
when
you could, I don't think you could put the machine in there, could you,
No.
Paul? I mean, it would be just sink out of sight. I mean,
Yeah.
I remember walking it, and
Yeah.
I don't think you could grind it without calling me to come down there and winch your machine
It
back out.
is really wet.
Yeah,
It is
and that's,
really wet.
and that's kind of like a focus of a reserve area, I would think, for now. But really what I'm trying to focus the invasive plant management on is the areas that actually can grow trees and grow healthy trees, you know what I mean? The good sites, the real good sites. Protect the forested upland sites. So, and where Jeff is cut, right now is a good time to go get those plants before they start spreading in his skid trails and all of those, you know, it's a great time to get them.
Is that handwork, though, or mechanical work?
Hand, all
Yeah.
hand.
All handwork?
Yep, just,
Okay.
literally, it's at the point right now, that site, where you could have one person with a backpack and do a glyphosate.
Oh, you're talking
application.
about a spray, not
Yep.
cut at
Nope.
all, not just
Nope.
spray, and that would be around Labor Day then,
A little before maybe.
a little
Yep.
before Labor Day.
Yep. So this is a good timing because I think this entire site is going to be great and can be treated very easily and not expensive. This area here has two factors. One, it's again more of that spot treatment, but that we'll have to look further at maybe if I had the grinder for another winter again to work that old pine stand in there and just work in between it and grind that stand. I know that the grinder the town has is great. It's in demand though, because we would like to use it at Rhines too, you know what I mean, on the buckthorn over at Rhines. But what we did out here, we still have work to do out here that we haven't finished. But it does a good job at stopping the spread, and then you can treat it from that point. Because when you have invasive plants this tall, you know, over your head, your options are limited on any type of chemical treatment because you really shouldn't be spraying foliage this high. So you end up having to do a cut stem treatment, which is cut every stem and do a application on the stump. Whereas with that grinder, you grind it and treat the sprout at this level. And it makes it much more effective. So, anyway,
Talking about grinder on an excavator?
yep.
Yeah.
We call them a mower, forestry mower or mulcher. We use excavator ones, skid steer mounted ones. When you're working in a forested stand, trying to work around all the trees, the small excavator with the boom works really good. Field edges, old fields, tracked skid steer. We'll grind it real quick. So, anyway, did I answer your question? I talk a lot.
No, you did.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
I think, Mark, the
Understood.
question, the real concern for me, and I'm sorry to do this, but Paul, we can't be everywhere at the same time.
No, I know.
You know, and that is our concern. It's the discussion Mike and I have had several times thinking about, well, how do we prioritize? If we're jumping around from forest to forest, are we doing more disservice than we are doing help? And that's where, you know, the forestry committee comes in, and that's where Paul comes in. So we're looking for your direction to say, okay, work here or move to another site. And like you said, we have the same issues in Rhines, we have the same issues back behind us here in the town forest, and now at Twin Brook. And they're not going away, and we're also, our neighbors around us, if they're not doing anything, we're just basically shoveling against the tide for a while. And that makes it frustrating as well. And it's difficult to put in a replanting schedule when you see the invasive wall coming right at you from your neighbors.
Right.
So,
And I agree, we've had these conversations. We've actually had, in another community, we actually, prior to a treatment on that, one of their public sites, we actually went to the neighbors because we had to have a discussion with the neighbors. A lot of the seed source was coming from the neighboring property. In this situation, I agree with you, we have to prioritize. It's just, and that's why I'm saying like you were saying, the wetland, realistically, that's way down on the bottom of the list. So on the Twin Brooks, we really need to prioritize where we cut last. That's gotta be the highest priority, because that's where the most sunlight is at this point in the forested canopy, through the canopy. So we need to focus on that, because realistically, that site is very savable. I mean, it's gonna take, I think, a day with a backpack, and you know, you've got that treated, that site. And then you follow up with a treatment like we've done out here after. So I think that's right. In the Rhines forest, that's gonna be part of an invasive plant too. The problem in there is a lot of our invasive plants are very tall now. So we have, again, you know, me saying, could we use the mower before we treat it? But the mower needs to be out here. So I'm trying to prioritize, I really am.
I know you've got one as well. We'll get to it and see. You've been waiting. Go ahead. Do you have a question?
I do, probably more for Manager Shane, but I think we have 3 individuals on town staff now who are licensed to spray, right? So just going, kind of piggybacking on what you mentioned about the grants and the funding. So if we have those resources internally, is it the herbicide that we're applying for grants for, or what does the money look like and the expenditures, and can we get more because we have 3 people who are licensed, or?
I know what you're saying. I would suggest this. You can absolutely use the staff to do that. I would suggest in the grant application, applying as though you were hiring an outside vendor for that. But you can absolutely use staff as well, you know, to do that. The last applications that went out in this same grant process, they used the pool of money before they even got halfway through the applications. That's how the demand in southern Maine. I would advise not only the herbicide, but also the machine time. Do you know what I mean for the town excavator and the mulcher head? I would actually use that as part of the application in the grant. And I've done some of these for the town forest on Route 9 in North Yarmouth, the red pine plantations there. Those are full of buckthorn. We have a grant application for that as well. But you can absolutely use those personnel, but I would actually apply as if you were hiring the contractor that you've used in the past to do the spraying at their rate, I guess, is what I'm saying, whatever their rate was.
Very expensive.
Yeah, I'm sure it was very expensive, yes.
Counselor Story King, I
Yep.
think you had a question as well.
Sounding nerdy again. So, are there any grants or applications or organizations that use goats? I know it's being used in other places, like Purdue University has
Right.
sponsored a program to use goats.
Right.
I know the city of Westbrook 2 years ago they said 7 goats will clean an acre of invasives in a month. Jeffrey, are you considering goats and goat milk in your herd? I mean, you're right there. But seriously, I just wonder about other options.
I agree.
If that blue area is doing nothing, John, maybe you want to put some goats out in your backyard. Go all the way back to that blue area. If it's not gonna, I mean, and
I agree. If we have something that would, if I can figure out something that will work other than the grinder and the spray, absolutely.
they said the seeds through the goats don't regerminate either, like they do through, like a bird will
Yeah, bird,
deposit the
yep,
seeds other
yep.
places, but that's not as likely with goat manure.
I think anything, this is so spreading so rapidly in southern Maine from when I was, that and ticks, right? From when I was a kid, that, literally, John and I have had discussions about setting fire, prescribed burning to it. Do you know what I mean? When I was young, everybody burned their fields. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
we did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we've had discussions about whether, prescribed fire can be used. I mean, I've used prescribed fire with the Nature Conservancy to grow pitch pine. You know what I mean? On some of their forests. I'm not saying light your forest on fire, but I'm just saying, are there other options as well? And,
Right.
and I think they're all worth looking at, yes. Yep.
I'll look for grants for goats.
Go,
That's great, add it.
or
Now
people
work on
would,
Jeffrey and John.
goats would eat, we'd have to train them to not eat the trees, but we could work on
Well,
that.
the
and-
trees are gone already.
Yeah,
in
and
the
if,
blue spot, in the blue area.
in
they're
some
just-
of those areas, right, we could work on where the worst first approach, fence in an area. Yeah, I mean, anything like that is possible because, I mean, I don't want to say spray everything. Do you know what I mean? I'm looking for alternatives all the time. That's why we had the discussion about fire. But realistically, that's why I'm saying prioritize lower those heavily infested areas and just save your areas that you can right now, and then we'll work on those other areas.
But if you could get rid of all those seeds
Yeah,
in that area that
Yeah.
prevent them from spreading to the other areas,
you've seen they
Yeah, I
put
saw,
goats on Christmas trees, old Christmas trees, eating them, you know what I mean? And I'm open for anything because if you had asked me 24 years ago, if my forestry career, I would stand here in front of you guys and focus on invasive plants, I would have said, what? Invasive what? Because, I like painting trees, you know what I mean, and managing forests. And to me, the next generation of foresters, this is gonna be their top priority. It's just saving the forest from invasive plants.
we all, if we built houses or moved into houses in the 90s, we planted ornamentals that are now
I know,
considered,
I know. The nice,
barberry and
right? That's what I
birding
said.
bush.
The
and-
nurseries were selling these.
Yeah.
Euonymus, burning bush, right?
Yeah.
Even Norway maple, right? The maples with the beautiful purple leaves, right? That's a Norway, that's invasive. So, yeah, it's gonna be a constant effort, but, in the future, I think foresters are gonna spend more time working on eradication and saving forests than cutting them, like I did.
Counselor Douglas?
Oh, yeah. Just one question on management in general.
Sure.
Is there any windows, post or pre-frost? Can we do anything during that time, or is it truly only during, like, the post-frost to frost season?
We actually utilize the grinder in the winter
Okay.
to do some grinding. We did, a lot of this grinding was when, we didn't do any last year, no staff. Yeah, so the winter before, we actually did the grinding out here during the winter.
Okay.
I forget the gentleman's name.
Dan Burr.
Dan ran the machine when he wasn't doing snow, so he would go out and do grinding. He did a great job, and it worked out great. So yes, we can do work with the mechanical removal in those conditions. I mean, the volunteer committee goes out in Rhines annually, and I took my Boy Scout troop out there, and we just went at it with buckthorn. It gave a bunch of Boy Scouts a pair of clippers and they were loving it. So they cut a bunch of it. So we were trying to determine if we cut it for several years in a row, if it would start to impact its resprouting. But so far it's still resprouting. So it is looking better. Yeah. So more Boy Scouts. I hope that was helpful. Was that helpful?
It was very
Okay.
helpful, and I know
Yeah.
for this agenda item, there's no action because it's to hear the report, but my first thought is we need to take action. And so I think with that might move us to the next agenda item, which is actually to set a public hearing. This is 23-083, to set a public hearing date of August 14th to actually consider and act on the adoption of the Twin Brook Recreation Forest Management Plan and invasive plant control practice plan as recommended by the town forester.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Mr. Chair, I think it would be really helpful for that meeting on the 14th if the council could come with just some objectives, because we really need to do something. And adopting the plan will say these areas should be cut. Are we prepared to fund that? And are we prepared to continue to fund that on an annual basis? In some areas, it is shoveling against the tide. In other areas, like Paul pointed out today, is really where our energy and our effort should go to save those sections of the forest. So I don't want to basically just have the LCC show up here on the next meeting and then you tell Gordon, just go forth and make it happen. And I think Sally is a
So Sally,
question.
please, if you want to step to the microphone, but as you're getting ready to speak, doing project management in my day-to-day job, my first thought is when you're talking about these different areas where there's priorities, what I envision is almost a spreadsheet that lists out our different areas of town and color codes them based on their risk in the area that we need to target first. Start figuring out which areas are rescuable, if you will.
Right.
And in my view, take action on those immediately. And again, if that's within a budget, we do that. And if more is needed, we discuss it. But please, Sally, go ahead.
Well, one of the things that the committee had asked Paul to do in the invasive plan was to do exactly that. So there is a table in the plan that prioritizes which areas we should go in first and lists a proposed timing schedule for each of those different areas and what the actual treatment would entail. We included that as a recommendation. So if you decide to adopt the plan, those recommendations would stand in there. We gave a little flexibility in it because we weren't sure whether we'd be able to get the town staff on board this year, this in 2023, or whether we'd have to wait till 2024. So one of the things you might consider is bumping up the timeline, because I think, if I'm not mistaken, our first recommendation was to move forward in 2024. If we could do, yeah, okay, Paul's saying yes. So if we could bump that up to 2023, that'd be great. We obviously wouldn't have any grants from the state in hand yet this year. Any grant that we apply for would come in and be something that we could work with next year.
And that's another question that I have is someone on the LCC or is that someone on the council or town staff who's responsible for submitting that grant? Or how would that, who's taking that on?
We would be happy to do that with your blessing.
Okay.
We applied for the Project Canopy grants that gave us funding to put together the management plan. We also applied for the invasive species plants that helped us fund the invasive species plan that Paul put together. So
Great.
we're happy to do that.
Gordon, did you have something to add?
Yeah, the treatment grants are due on the 14th
Of August.
of August. So we will be applying for those between now and then, based on the plan Paul, the one that Paul talked about tonight is one of 3 that he created for the forests in town.
Gonna have to get closer to the mic.
Yeah, I think you might have to get a little closer to the mic.
One of three. And that's, so we'll be applying for those in the next 3 weeks, right, over time, to get that in, and we'll use, Paul obviously has contacts, we can get estimates in and apply for them financially in the way that he suggested. The one thing that just for everyone needs to keep in mind, right, we do have 3 people now that work for the town that are licensed to apply these herbicides, but they're full-time employees, right? They have jobs, so we can't just pull them off of the, Chris Bolduck's not here tonight, but I've spoken with him before about this, right? We still need to find a way to use that, just like we need to use the equipment when it's available, when there's an operator available to use it. It's gonna be the same with these chemicals because these people are already working, primarily at Valhalla is what I understand, but doing maintenance at Valhalla. So we're gonna have to find that balance, and we have on our agenda, right, this is the last major forest management plan for the town, for our large town-owned forests. So once this plan is finalized and adopted by the council, our next largest agenda item for the foreseeable future is addressing invasives. And so that's what we're talking about doing already, right? And it is, I can't guarantee color coding, but we have talked about, we need a priority list that covers all the forests. And then we do need to work with Chris primarily to understand how to access, what's the process for accessing those resources? What kind of time does he think he can give us? So when you give us a directive, hopefully on the 14th, I just want to make sure everyone keeps that in mind, that we don't have the power to commandeer resources, right? That's going to have to be a balance with the existing roles that people play.
So just for the council's information, the last time we contracted this, 2 days was nearly $17,000. So if we can work with town staff and prioritize a week really around Labor Day, it might have to be slightly after Labor Day, we could look at, 4 or 5 days, we could get those sprayers out there. And under certain licenses, they can also have somebody else spray with them. So we were looking to dedicate the entire, as much of the staff, 5, 6 people if we could, to help with that program. And that would really put a big dent in what we're trying to do. But it doesn't make a lot of sense to cut 20 acres and only be able to treat 5, because all 20 acres are going to be back to the same height if we don't treat them. And what we found here in the town forest, we've had to basically do it twice. So Paul's point about applying for the grant, but factoring in the mechanical equipment and like an outside sprayer is not a bad idea, so that we don't miss that opportunity. And it's a waste of time if we do all that labor work and don't go back and spray. So.
Yep, I would agree completely. Paul, did you have anything else you wanted to add? I saw you jumping up.
Just one more comment. So we do have grants which will help to the priority. We have grants for the plans for the other forest as well. To just what's been produced here will be produced for the other forest, and from those plans you'll have a list of the priorities based on those. And on the I'll say this too, labor is affecting this market as well for the treatment of these. The power line corridors are using a lot of resources to maintain the corridors. The entity that you hired were they from Maine or were they?
New Hampshire.
New Hampshire. So finding contractors is part of the issue as well. But I have some other recommendations for the town of Cumberland that might be more cost effective than that. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Paul, and thank you, Sally and Gordon. And it's my understanding that, Gordon, it's your birthday, so happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
That's on the record.
What a birthday.
Okay, so we have the agenda, I guess, discussed to set a public hearing date of August 14th to consider and act on the adoption of the Twin Brook Recreation Area Forest Management Plan and Invasive Plant Control Practice Plan as recommended by the town forester. I would welcome any discussion or a second, or excuse me, or a motion from. So moved. Okay, we've got a motion. We have a second, seems like.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any public comment? Seeing none. All those in favor? Unanimous.
Jeffrey Goats.
Okay, so that is it for legislation and policy. We will move now to new business. Counselor Kopp, I will start with you.
I'll donate my $20 for the 4-H food pantry, as I do every meeting. Tonight, before I arrived here at the meeting, we had another pretty serious accident at the intersection right in front of my shop. One car failed to stop for the stop sign and another one hit it. There was some serious PI. Well, they actually had to call a rescue from Falmouth to come assist as well. That's the second accident we've had there in less than a week. So people need to be aware that there is a stop sign there because people are going right through it. And everybody, I think, will be okay, but there was some serious injuries, so that's all I have.
Thank you. Counselor Vale.
Nothing this evening.
Counselor Filson.
Nothing from me.
Counselor Douglas.
Nothing from me.
I'm all set.
Counselor
Holy
Story King.
moly, saving me all sorts of time. I've had a resident or two, and I spoke to Ron about this earlier, concerned about the water pressure on Skillens Road. It all of a sudden just stops, like people will be in the shower and the water pressure just kind of disappears. So if we could, I know the Portland Water District was in one of the neighbor yards looking at, investigating whether it was a valve problem at that household. It was not. So if we could kind of find out what's going on with the water up in West
So-
Cumberland. Ron says it happens at his shop too.
So remember, that water area is serviced by a pump station. That is pumped from Blanchard Road, just before, on Fred Kinney's property, where
Yeah.
we have that little station. And it's always going to be a problem until a water tank is installed, because as that pressure in the line drops, those pumps kick in, and there's always that lag of basically building up the water line again. I'll talk to the water district and basically make sure they're checking the pump station as well,
Okay.
because when that drops, we can't get the required pressure out of the fire trucks. The pumps cavitate
Right.
on our fire trucks when we open those valves, so it has to be very slow when we're transferring water into the trucks as well. So, Gerald's here, he's been through it many times, and we've had to train a lot of people on that. That's why that water tank is extremely important for West Cumberland, and if we're successful in the roundabout in that project, that'll be part of hopefully an economic development plan that'll get a water tank, which will eliminate that headache for all of us. I'm afraid that's the answer we're going to get from the water district, but I will ask them to check to make sure if there's something else that's contributing to that. Because of the higher elevation that section of town is at, we have to basically kind of pretend that we're at a higher pressure level, and those pumps are forcing the water out to West Cumberland. And as the volume comes down, water pressure decreases, and we get into this cycle of just not any water. It almost
Yeah,
does
and there
like
seems
stops.
to be like no rhyme or reason on the time, or,
Nope.
it doesn't seem dependent on usage, but maybe it is, or.
Well, it's, if we're doing training, using hydrants or any of that stuff, or filling tanks or other things, that could be, and we try not to do that very frequently, but it is a problem, and it will be a problem until the tank is installed. And that hopefully we'll be addressing
I
sooner
do have
rather
a
than
couple of
later.
other items I'd like to speak to, and the manager addressed one earlier this evening, and I appreciate him taking credit or blame or whatever it is regarding the event Wednesday night at Tweedsbrook. I'm a process person, and I just want to go on the record for the public. I serve on the Twin Brook Advisory, I served on the Twin Brook Advisory Program, and I serve on the Recreation Advisory Program. And I was a bit surprised on Tuesday, July 11th, to learn of Tweedsbrook. And so I reached out to people, and I just want to say that we have a detailed process for events hosted at Twin Brooks and other recreational facilities. And from my viewpoint, that wasn't followed, and this instance. And I know that there are different viewpoints on this, and it's unproductive to debate them. But I had particular questions when I learned that there were five food trucks. I expected lots of people coming, and then thought of the abutters. We didn't go through the process, and so we didn't notify the abutters. And it's not, for me, it's not about the food trucks, it's about the process. We've never had a council discussion or a recreational advisory committee discussion about whether we allow food trucks on public lands. Similar with vendors, you know, who are the vendors? Are they approved vendors? Who are they? Why were they chosen? I went on the record back in March of this year opposed to an event at Twin Brooks because it was being hosted by a for-profit person at Twin Brooks. I'm not comfortable using public lands for-profit. So I think there are lots of questions that if we had gone through the process, we might have, I would feel more comfortable. I would like to know, are there any public safety needs? Do we need to make sure kids aren't going to bounce their head against another kid's teeth and lose their front teeth in the bouncy house? Do we need to have event insurance like we did when we had the bicentennial? So I just wanted to share that. Not including the recreational committee or going through the town council in this process felt a little bit uncomfortable with me, to me. So I just want to, I'm sure that everyone's intentions are positive, and I just want to go on the record that I am certain that the planners have good intentions. I just, in the future, would like us to have more conversation about what we support. Another thing I want to be transparent about is our involvement with SAD's planning for the additional school. You all know that our constituents voted the school down in last November, and they're planning to go ahead with another vote. Although I tried to watch their online, did anyone see if they decided on a vote?
They did not.
They did not on the online.
They did not,
version, no.
all right. Well, I've heard lots of comments both in support and opposed to their plans for a new vote. And as many opinions as there are just as many emotions. One thing I keep hearing from a variety of demographic groups is they're just not listening. And sometimes that just not listening, they are just not listening, includes us. And I just want to be careful moving forward to not only represent the 30% of our households who have kids in school, but the other 70% as well. I think we need to do a better than average job at listening and representing the concerns of all our citizens. I think we need to investigate their concerns and give them as many answers as we can about the costs and impacts to their household. I've had several people ask me, and I know others of you have as well, what would it cost to leave or dissolve the SAD? I'm not saying I would advocate for that. I just want to say that right now. I'm not advocating for that, just as someone on social media said she's not advocating. I just think we need the facts. And the example that was given to me by one of my family members is, well, the school's going to be $100 million, right? Yeah. And Cumberland has to pay $70 million of that, right? Right? Well, what if it only costs us $50 million to leave the district? I think it could probably cost $300 million to leave the district, but I think we need to know how much it would cost, because if it saved $20 million, that's $20 million to our constituents. On the other hand, I've heard, or not on the other hand, in addition, I've heard a lot of people make comments about planning for the future. I'm not super comfortable with having the largest primary school in the whole state. And that's what that would be. There are larger elementary schools. Brewer has a larger elementary school. They're K-8. I shared information with the school board about neighborhood schools. Not one school board member came back and asked me any questions about that. I shared research. I have a master's degree plus in education. I'm happy to contribute to the conversation. And I think we need to plan for our futures together. We're not getting smaller. Cumberland and North Yarmouth aren't getting smaller. And I think we need to have all the information. Tonight, in the LDS report, based on the census, Cumberland school-age population is going down 10%. The numbers that the school presents us with, the enrollment's going up. So the truth is probably somewhere in between. But we need to know all the facts in order to plan to move forward. One of the things that I shared in our workshop today is, you know, one of the demographic groups leaving our community are the 44 to 64-year-olds. And those are our highest wage earners. How is that going to impact the future ability of future taxpayers to pay high property taxes? So I don't want to dismiss the concerns of my community with flippant phrases like, our town is changing. Change is human and inevitable. Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world. I want to be part of change that is intelligent, respectful, and thoughtful. It's time to put away emotions, rhetoric, and scare tactics and move forward with purposeful planning and transparency. We need to make decisions with all the information we can gather, minus our egos and agendas. And I'm the first one to sign up to help look for solutions in the future. So I just want to continue the conversation and keep it on the front burner for all of us. And that's my soapbox for tonight.
That's great. Thank you very much, Shirley. In that vein, I did meet and speak with the chair of the school board, and it's my understanding that this may be the first year where there are actually more children in the portables than there are actually in the Mabel I. Wilson building. And so that, when I heard that, kind of shocked me a little bit. Obviously, we're the council, we're not on the school board, but working together, figuring out what those numbers actually are is critically important.
And I've taught in a portable. I taught 5 years in a portable, so
Yep. My kids are in it
Yep.
right now. The only issue I have, or the only thing for new business I have, is just a reminder. Town manager brought it up. We do have a tax assistance program that we're taking applications in July right now for folks who are 70 years of age or older and make, I believe it was below $93,000 a year, and have lived in Cumberland for 10 years. This is a rebate program. It's my understanding that this is extremely quick to apply for. If you are listening tonight, if you are in that demographic, please come in and apply. Those meetings will be held with the applicants in August. That is it from me. I would take a motion to adjourn from anyone.
So moved.
I have a question for the manager that I was asked and I forgot. All of the yellow flags, Bill, up and down Blanchard Road out here, what is going on? Is that something to do with the gas line, I assume?
No.
No?
Yeah, it's the DOT. It was for their ditching all the way up and down the road. They're looking to basically jump around before they turn over the roads to us and complete ditching they didn't get to last year. Just drive down Tuttle and look at the great work.
Yeah, right, okay. Thank you.
I don't know why they had to do what they had to do. It really didn't improve much.
Yeah.
Okay, so I know we have a motion to adjourn. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.